Assalamualaikum, my name is Nurul Hawa binti YAAKOB, and the topic I'm going to talk about is Cold War. But first of all, I will be explaining about what causes the Cold War. The Soviet Union and the United States fought as allies against the Axis power during World War II, but there was tension in the two countries' relationship. Americans had long-standing reservations about Soviet communism and worries about Joseph Stalin's brutal control of his own nation. The Soviets, on the other hand, despised the Americans for delaying their participation into World War II, which resulted in the death of millions of Russians and for their decades-long unwillingness to recognize the USSR as a legitimate member of the world community. Many Americans were alarmed by the Soviet Union's post-World War II expansionism in Eastern Europe. The USSR, however, grew resentful of American officials' bellicose language, weapons build-up, and aggressive approach to world affairs. So now, we wonder how it happened. The post-war division of Europe, which Soviet leader Joseph Stalin felt did not accurately reflect his country's contribution, did not satisfy him. In the 1946 Long Telegram, as it is known now, Ambassador George Kennan described the Soviet Union's growing mistrust in the United States. The USSR is unstable and illogical, and Kennan saw that Soviet ideology would not work with the West in the long run. In response, Washington launched a containment strategy to stop the expansion of Soviet ideology and power. The US soon had a chance to test out its new approach, the Truman Doctrine, the idea that the United States should support nations or people that are endangered by Soviet forces or communist insurrection. It was established when President Harry Truman took advantage of the opportunity to petition Congress for funding nations to build democratic systems. Stalin's effort to expand Soviet power westward and conquer other governments weren't just a concern for the US. In 1948, the USSR supported a communist takeover in Czechoslovakia and placed a blockade on West Berlin, which had been split into capitalist and communist occupation zones. NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was established by the United States and its members as a transatlantic mutual defense alliance. In response, the USSR formed its own defensive alliance, the Warsaw Pact, which was signed in 1955 and strengthened the ideological and military partition between Eastern and Western Europe. By the middle of the 1980s, in the former Soviet Union, democratic revolutions were growing while the country itself suffered with economic and political instability. The United States and the Soviet Union developed a more cordial relationship, and in 1987, they even helped to negotiate a nuclear agreement. The Warsaw Pact was officially disbanded in 1991 after the Soviet Union had lost the majority of its own bloc to democratic uprisings. The final president of the USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev, exposed his nation to Western influence and implemented economic reforms. The USSR was split up into many countries in December 1991. Now we will move on to the impact of Cold War to the world. First, the military blocs NATO and the Warsaw Pact were formed. Second, Cold War led to destructive conflicts like the Vietnam War and the Korean War. Thirdly, political system transition. Alliances in Eastern Europe started to fall apart, leading nations like Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia to declare their independence. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, ending the Cold War and allowing East and West Germany to formally rejoin within a year. Lastly, US as superpower. In the years following the fall of Soviet Union, the United States was able to establish itself as the leading superpower, although Russia has made progress in recent years. The USSR collapse left the US as the sole remaining superpower in the globe. The US held a position of dominance, supremacy, or preeminence enjoyed for the 20 plus years after the fall of the Soviet Union. That's all from me. Thank you.